The morning sun crept slowly through the thin curtains of Anna Muller's small attic room, casting pale golden stripes across the wooden floor. The light touched the old photographs hanging on the wall, soft reminders of a life that once felt warm, familiar, and safe. In one photo, her mother's gentle smile glowed under the summer sky. In another, her father stood proudly beside their small cottage. And at the center of them all, a little boy, her younger brother, Emil, laughing with unrestrained joy. Now they were all memories. Shadows suspended in frames. Anna sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, listening to the quiet creaks of the old house. The world outside looked peaceful, but inside she felt a heaviness that had grown with each passing month, a weight the whole country seemed to carry. She pressed her hand against her chest, exhaling slowly. She missed them. She missed everything. The air smelled faintly of the season as first frost when she stepped into the narrow streets of her small Bavarian town. Cobblestones glistened with dew, and shopkeepers were only beginning to open their doors. It would have been a normal morning, like the ones she remembered from childhood, if not for the tension that clung to every whispered conversation. Newspapers rustled with headlines printed in bold black letters. Radios crackled with urgent, somber voices. People walked faster than they used to, as if trying to outrun the uncertainty that crept behind them. War. The word lingered like smoke in the air. A persistent, unwelcome guest in every home and every thought. Anna adjusted the basket in her arms and kept walking. She passed the same baker she'd known since she was a child. He gave her a polite nod, but no smile today. No one really smiled anymore, not genuinely. Her life had become a quiet rhythm of survival. Help the neighbors, collect meager supplies, tend to her small garden behind the house, and try not to think too much. Thinking only made the loneliness louder, amplifying the silence in her empty home. She remembered the night her brother died, the sound of distant explosions rattling the windows. The chaos on the bridge, the screams, the confusion. Emil's small hand had slipped from hers in a single, heart-stopping moment, a moment she relived every time she closed her eyes. She had screamed his name until her voice broke, until her throat was raw, but the dark, rushing river had swallowed everything. Anna forced the memory down, pushing back the familiar sting of tears. She had to keep moving. She had to survive. Hundreds of miles away, in the quiet countryside of Austria, Jakob Steiner was chopping wood behind his family's farmhouse. The rhythmic thud of the axe against the log was a steady, grounding sound that echoed across the rolling green hills. Cold air stung his bare hands, but Jakob didn't stop. He welcomed the burn in his muscles. It was a physical distraction, a way to keep his mind from wandering to places he didn't want it to go. His father, a veteran of the Great War, watched him from the porch. There was pride in the old man's weathered eyes, but it was overshadowed by a deep, familiar fear. "You're almost 19, his father said, his voice raspy. "If war truly arrives, they will call for you." Jakob rested the axe against the growing log pile. "I know," he replied calmly, though a knot tightened in his stomach every time the subject came up. Growing up, he had listened to his father's stories, not tales of glory, but of mud-soaked trenches, sleepless nights filled with the sound of shelling, gnawing hunger, and the constant chilling presence of death. He'd seen the haunted look in his father's eyes when he spoke of comrades who never came home. His father had always said, "War is not glory. It is not heroism. It is only death." But secretly, Jakob felt something else stirring within him, something he never dared to admit aloud. A strange pull. A sense that his life was about to change, that he was meant for something bigger than the small farm he had always known. It was a feeling that both frightened and excited him, a conflict that churned inside him with every swing of the axe. He lifted the heavy tool again, bringing it down with force, trying to silence his own tumultuous thoughts in the splintering of wood. Far to the east, in the bustling, snow-dusted city of Leningrad, Elena Petrova hurried through the narrow corridors of the local hospital. Her scarf trailed behind her as she rushed from one ward to another, carrying blankets, medicines, or sometimes just a kind word and a gentle touch. She was only 20, yet life had already forced her to grow up much faster than she'd ever imagined. Patients filled every room, every hallway, not only the sick, but the hungry, the exhausted, the terrified. Her country had already begun preparing for the inevitable. Factories worked through the night, their smokestacks painting the sky gray. Families whispered about evacuation plans, their voices low and anxious. Posters lined the city walls, urging citizens to stand strong for the motherland, their bold red letters a stark contrast to the falling snow. Elena paused near a window, watching the snowflakes drift lazily from the sky, settling on the rooftops and the frozen river below. She thought of her father, who had lost his job at the shipyard and now spent his days desperately searching for any work he could find. Her mother worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, sewing uniforms for soldiers who hadn't yet been called, but surely would be. War changes everything, her mother often said, her needle never stopping. It does not knock, it breaks down the door. Elena believed her. Yet even in the fear that was beginning to suffocate the city, she found a sense of purpose in helping others. Every bandage she wrapped, every feverish brow she cooled, every child she comforted, each small act felt like pushing back against the encroaching darkness, inch by inch. She didn't know it yet, but soon she would face horrors she could not possibly imagine. Her strength and compassion would be tested in ways that would change her forever. Across the sea in England, Thomas Bennett stood on a cliff overlooking the vast, endless blue of the Channel. The wind whipped through his brown hair, carrying with it the faint, familiar smell of salt and sea. Below him, the waves crashed against the rocks with a steady, powerful rhythm, a sound he had loved since he was a boy. Thomas dreamed of flying. Not to escape, but to soar above it all. Up where the world looked simple and orderly, where the messy problems of nations and men seemed small and insignificant. He dreamed of the freedom of the open sky, a place where the constant noise of politics and fear became distant whispers. His father was a naval officer, and Thomas had grown up on tales of duty, honor, and courage at sea. He admired his father deeply, but his own heart belonged to the sky, not the water. He imagined himself in the cockpit of a Spitfire, slicing through the clouds, feeling a sense of total freedom and control. Yet even this dream had begun to feel heavy, tainted by the dark shadow of war. Airfields across the country buzzed with frantic activity. Recruitment papers appeared everywhere in post offices, on public billboards, in the hands of young men on the street. And every night the radio filled their homes with solemn warnings and patriotic music. The call was coming. Thomas closed his eyes and inhaled the salty air deeply. Soon, too soon, he knew he would be called to serve, and he would go. Not because he wanted to fight, not because he craved adventure, but because he couldn't stand by and do nothing while the world he knew fell apart. He would trade his dream of freedom for the duty of defense. 4 different countries, 4 different lives. Each one unique, filled with its own hopes, fears, and memories. Yet every one of them felt the same chill in the air. A shared unspoken sense that something enormous and unstoppable was approaching. A storm that would soon engulf them all. Before that storm breaks, before war rips their lives apart and shatters their worlds, before fate twists their paths together in ways they could never predict. This is who they were. This is what they stood to lose. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories of the human experience during history's most defining moments. We'll see you next time.